launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed.
Space Monkeys blasting off about DeFi, Episode 3, and we are already surrounded by titans. Today we have Dominik Harz, PhD candidate at the Center for Cryptocurrency Research and Engineering at Imperial College London, and the co-founder of Interlay, the company behind InterBTC and Kintsugi, the destined winner of the 12th parachain slot on Kusama, and the first fully decentralized cross-chain Bitcoin protocol, if you can believe it. We have 0x Brainjar, head of product at Composable Finance, originally with a background in physics, and also the leader of Composable Labs, the incubator for projects using Composable's tech stack, which, if you've been following the channel, you know is expanding at an alarming pace. And then we have the co-founders of SolarBeam.io, Firekid, a former senior trader in one of the world's largest energy companies, and Solar Ape, who spent 10 years developing in traditional finance before moving over to crypto. We had Firekid buy an ape and join the ChaosDao, and we just watched slackjawed as the total value locked in the protocol jumped from 19 million to 119 million in 10 days. Just a fantastic user experience. Every time I go there, there's more of what I want to see. Excellent product. Dominik, Brainjar, Firekid, Solar Ape, welcome to the Space Monkeys podcast.
Nice meeting you guys.
Thank you very much.
We are glad to be here.
Great to be here.
Great to be here.
Hello, guys.
Okay, Moonbee, here we are, and my brain has never felt so tiny.
Well, yeah. I just feel the vacuum up there. But but honestly, with so much knowledge about finances and the finance ecosystem floating around us right now, I would like to get some points of views or opinions about what money is from you guys. Maybe Brainjar, you could start us off with that. What is money in your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we view it in the metaverse is definitely a lot different than the outside world, for sure. But I think, at least from my perspective, like basically being in the metaverse and eventually trying to bridge what we're doing beyond the metaverse to like the outside world is, I think fundamentally money is just a vehicle for the capabilities to unlock, additional possibilities. So the first thing I thought of when you said money was basically just like the idea of liquidity and how we sort of view it as, internally, at least when we talk about these type of things within Composable, we just sort of view it as like actual water, like flowing around from location to location and from chain to chain. But really it's actual like value that is getting transferred. And I think fundamentally, I think a lot of people also share this same sort of kind of metaphor that we also share, which is why it's exciting to see kind of people thinking about, how to most optimize capital efficiency and the sloshing of this kind of liquidity from place to place. So I think, the fact that we're viewing it in this realm, and then sort of, with the actual understanding that this is real, these are like real assets that can be redeemed for things in the real world, I think is very healthy actually, and we'll get things in a position where things are so capital efficient that then, people like, if we so choose, TradFi and others can then sort of come in and sort of see and participate in the things that we've created.
Well, for me, I mean, money is just like a method of transferring wealth from one to another. It's when you're a trader for life, I mean, when you start, you have, and you come from a, let's not say poor background, but from like an average background, you think that money is something too far away from your reach, and you can only dream, about having a lot of money. let's say, and then you enter the trading sector and you see that people are just signing a document or just replying on an email, and then they are transferring hundreds of millions of dollars like within within a day. So I mean, at that point, I think you lose sense of what money is, and you just see it as a method of exchange. Like you send something to someone, and then you get something else in return. So, in my opinion, money are just like the middle person, let's say, to exchange something from something for something else.
Well, the other two already said like what money kind of represents this medium of exchange that everybody kind of trusts. I guess the cool thing that Bitcoin did is when you kind of had cash before, right? And you could just give anyone cash, you could pay anyone, and nobody could really censor that. Nobody could control you giving cash to somebody else. But then when you want to give somebody cash from London to New York or something like that, you kind of have to go a digital way. And then you got all these custodial entities, right? You got like credit card companies and PayPal, and or even way before that, companies that would just hold it in custody and pay it out then at the other location. And then really what Bitcoin did as the one cool thing is that you could now pay somebody from London in New York without anybody actually being able to interfere that. So really this trustless way and censorship-resistant way of paying other people, I think that's the coolest contribution that Bitcoin did.
So, Dominik, what was the biggest flaw, or what is the biggest flaw of the current financial system as we know it in the real world?
Good question. I guess there's many flaws. Depends, I guess, also on your perspective. So, obviously, one thing is there's, if you think about control, there's the current financial system has controls, but being like players in the system, you can kind of circumvent that, and there's always clear incentives to go around these controls. And if you think about money laundering or offshore locations and all that kind of stuff, like there's very little, to kind of prevent that. And obviously financial crises happened where usually it's not the ones that made a lot of money that actually suffer from that, but more the average population. Whereas if you build crypto systems in the right way, you can enforce some of these rules in code, so people can't really break that. That's not to say that crypto solves everything perfectly, because there's still a lot of scams going on in crypto as well, but at least it gives us a new tool set that can kind of some pre-agreed rules of trust. We can at least encode them into this consensus system, and then allows us to really enforce these rules via code in a proactive way.
When you do oil trading, 99% of all deals must be made using dollar. So every time we had to do a transaction, we had to send a full report to the bank from why this money are being transferred. And since there was some shipping involved, a lot of times we had to mention the name of the vessel, for example, and because sometimes there were like common names between vessels, one belonging, let's say, to the US and the other might belong to Iran. And because they had common names, the whole transaction was getting delayed for like 10, 15 days in order for you to clarify the whole situation to the bank that you are not doing something illegal.
Oh my God, this is like hilariously crazy.
Wow.
Imagine having to deal with the whole paperwork.
Is there a difference between how liquidity works in the traditional world versus in crypto?
In general, I think liquidity is the same for TradFi or for crypto. You just like banks, they issue money and they expect back from people. Like when they lend money for people, they are just signing an agreement that people will pay back. So it's kind of a liquidity pool between the bank giving money and people giving something else that worth the same. With crypto is pretty much the same. The liquidity pool is made of tokens, and people are just arguing that this token have the same worth of value this other token. Like a token can be a startup or something, and the other token can be just like a stable token like USDC that is theoretically to backed by USDC.
I mean, I think that's true, but I also think one of the most important things that we sort of overlook in conversations when we talk about liquidity in DeFi versus TradFi is liquidity velocity. I think like the rate with which we see like liquidity just getting transferred from protocol to protocol is like absolutely ruthless. And it's like ruthless in a good way, I think, where it's like if you're just not offering the highest incentives anymore, it's like see you later, basically. Whereas like with banks, it's like your money's just there, like it's probably getting invested into like B tranche loans or something like that, like earning a very low yields, but like that's just the way it is because like what they have to go through like many different hoops to approve something new, right? Whereas like in this case, you just unstake and migrate your liquidity to another location. And so I think this like idea of liquidity velocity makes for, you know, things, yeah, it makes for like people in TradFi interested in DeFi specifically because of this idea. Like when you have faster liquidity, you have faster yield, and you have a lower cost of capital. And I think that's like a fundamental benefit for a lot of these, you know, banks, why they're looking into this space.
But I think that's mainly due to the free market because the liquidity right now, I mean, how it is in crypto and in all the farms and dexes, I mean, it's liquidity provided by people for the people, let's say. So it's like a free market and everyone can judge by himself or whatever where to put that liquidity. While in the traditional finance, I mean, in the banks, every bank you look, they have pretty much the same incentives, which is, I would argue, like zero right now. So when you jump into crypto and you just see that protocols or call them whatever you want, or different crypto projects, they give you enough incentives in order to provide liquidity. I mean, I don't see any actual reason for someone to going back to traditional finance or the banks and using an older model, except, let's say, the trust. But there are a lot of ways, and every day I think a lot of people in the space are trying to improve the trust in projects. I mean, even multi-sig or time locks and everything, it's just a way to increase trust against someone who is anonymous.
Yeah, and the thing is too is I wouldn't even like, I'm definitely harsh towards traditional finance and stuff like that, but as is I think most people in the space, but I also think that there's a lot of cool products, financial products specifically, that should exist in DeFi that don't exist yet, but it do exist.
Like what would you come up with? What would be a cool product that doesn't exist yet?
Yeah, I mean, so I think basically anything related. So, for instance, I'm a huge fan of like Element Finance and what they're doing, and I think, for instance, being able to do, I'm pretty sure this will exist shortly. But for instance, like you'd be able to have, imagine you have a yield token. What people have in traditional finance is these products that basically are just called total rate of return swaps, where basically I get this loan at X yield, and then I've pretty much like, syndicated or sold a portion of that loan at a lower interest rate. So now I'm getting this spread of like, say 2%. And I'm holding this asset that's earning me, 2%, where someone else is taking on the entire risk. And I can even just go take on leverage on that asset that somebody else has paid for. So I think in the future, very low hanging fruit would basically be, I grab my yield tokens. There's another yield token. I can just basically go short, sell that yield token, go long another yield token, and then just like have this position mint me another position which is yielding the delta, which can then be like leveraged up on in theory. So I think things like swaps and things that traditional banks do often between themselves, also things like intraday repos, right? Like where basically people are making a whole bunch of trades, like market makers are making a whole bunch of trades, and then they balance their books at the end of the day by taking out a intraday repo loan. I think this could also be extend itself well to things like, you know, say cross-layer liquidity rebalancing, offering protocols like Composable and other projects doing L2 stuff like protocol-based loans for these like short-term duration things.
Is this what Mosaic is enabling?
Yeah, I mean, in the future is definitely one of the features. I think like the main focus of Mosaic is about how do you get liquidity providers to like actually make money. So right now, like if you use Connext, for instance, there's no way for me to provide liquidity to Connext to make money. I have to go run a router. If I provide liquidity for any swap, I have to basically move to the destination layer, use this like, you know, any whatever dash, you know, other asset. Now I'm exposed to like impermanent loss. And I had to deposit that liquidity on that layer that I wanted to provide liquidity for. So these are all like cool short-term solutions, but the vision for Mosaic is saying, okay, I have $1 million that's earning 7% on harvest. I can make 14% APY by basically providing liquidity for people making swaps cross-layer. So I put my money into Mosaic on L1, and the rest is just handled on the back end. So that's kind of the idea.
That is wild. I'm wondering about the Bitcoin component because, what is it, 45% of the value in crypto today is locked on the Bitcoin network? So I'm wondering, Dominik, how we're going to bring that liquidity into the game.
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, you can't do an awful lot with Bitcoin on Bitcoin. So I think over time that will pretty much move over to the different DeFi chains, platforms, L2s, wherever it can be used. I think that's very much my personal opinion. I think in the very long run, if Bitcoin establishes itself as this like store of value where it's more similar to like gold or something like that, you just have like settlements on Bitcoin occasionally, but what will basically happen is that Bitcoin will be bridged over. Maybe you get even quite radical bridges, like very old ideas were to actually bridge Bitcoin over by burning Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain to have it permanently on the other chain. Maybe that idea will kind of come up again if the other chains are a little bit more mature. Let's see. The one thing that probably will happen is what Ranger also just outlined. You will likely have sort of liquidity providers that sit on basically the bridges that already went through that a little bit complicated process of like locking their Bitcoin on the Bitcoin side and issuing the wrapped Bitcoin token on the other chain and just kind of selling it. It's like when you go to use wrapped Bitcoin today on Ethereum, right? You have to go through KYC and AML with BitGo. So most people, I think it's just easier to buy wrapped BTC on, I don't know, Curve or Swap or wherever you want to get it. But I think, yeah, Bitcoin will eventually become the settlement layer because I don't really see them implementing any more advanced smart contracts that would allow producing and implementing these DeFi protocols that we see right now. But I think, yeah, eventually all the liquidity or pretty much all of it will go over because why invest in a coin that's basically only is a hedge against the US dollar basically when you could just also earn interest in actual Bitcoin. So in our system, for example, when you run a vault, you get interest in actual Bitcoin plus on our own native token. So it kind of makes sense if you're a little bit more advanced on the technical side to run one of these vaults and get that.
I'd be interested in how you want to achieve that because my perspective on the Bitcoin as of now is people jump into crypto to buy Bitcoin and many of them don't do a deeper dive into DeFi or anything else. They just keep their Bitcoin in the paper wallet and might forget about it for the next 5 years. How would you get those people attracted to your product?
That's a really good question. So you're right in the sense that if you have a person that basically just has Bitcoin in their PayPal wallet and they don't want to move it, then that's quite difficult. So the main thing that we're building right now is like this bridging, and that would you have to have like in our case you have to have a Polkadot.js wallet to move it over to actually wrap it. I'm kind of teasing this because it's not out yet, but we are working on a new kind of way to bridge it, where you would just basically have your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin side, and you would kind of just lock it, and you get like a claim on Bitcoin from other chains that you can then use inside of the protocols.
I like that.
The idea is probably you need to have there's going to be like different layers being built. Like one, obviously, for the say the average, the person who just knows Bitcoin, buys Bitcoin at an exchange, they would need to have probably either integrated directly into Exchange, such a solution, or have like a super easy to use wallet. Maybe integrated into Ledger and to one of these hardware wallets if they have one. Because otherwise it's just not really accessible, right? And I think there's a lot of companies now working on like making these multi-chain wallets as well. But especially when it comes to these wallets, I think we're still so early, and it's one of the biggest pain points in cross-chain UX design, where if you tell your user, hey, there you go, you have to use Polkadot.js, MetaMask, and then also a Bitcoin wallet, congratulations. Like, I know from our own testnet, this is really bad. Like, users are angry about that. But that's kind of the reality today, yeah.
We faced a situation that was unexpected with SolarBeam, and that situation was that so many of our users are like completely new to DeFi. Like, they have no idea what yield farming is, what any of the DeFi in general is. I mean, some of them don't even know how to use the basic functions of MetaMask. For example, there was a case that someone swapped Mover for wrapped Mover, and he thought he lost his money because he didn't add the custom token on MetaMask, for example, so he couldn't see his money. So he was like, I just lost everything. And I think finding an easy way for everyone to start using DeFi is like a thing that people should be focusing in.
Yeah, I think there was this some time ago, I don't know, one of the VCs was posting an interesting post, which is also, by the way, not possible in TradFi right now. But essentially, if you think about your own finances, maybe it should be as easy as like a Google Maps kind of a thing. I want to get from A to B, like this is kind of my risk appetite, this is what I'm kind of expecting in terms of returns. And just let the app figure it out, like which protocols and which way to combine it, and automatically rebalance it. Maybe that's the stage we eventually will get to. Crypto probably will help because you have a ton of open APIs, so technically you could build such a thing. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of open problems there to be solved, not just on the UX side, but also on the technology side. But maybe in the long run we'll get there.
Something I really admire about the SolarBeam project is just how great the user experience is, and just how much information is there to really help the newbies feel like they have a little more of an idea of what's going on.
Honestly, I couldn't believe how many people had so much interest in yield farming. I don't think they even understand the concept most of the time. And a lot of users, they just see like yearly returns is like 25, 30, 40%. And they are like, oh my God, this is huge. And I think this is a problem with the traditional finance, because right now they do see 25 APR on a stable pool. And they're like, hey, I can just lock my dollars and get 25%. And then I think this is the first intro they have in yield farming. And then they see that, okay, oh, wait, there's another farm that just gives 500 per APR. how do I do that? And they just start buying coins, and they don't even know how to yield farm. So, at first it was such, we were spending most of our time just doing step-by-step guides in DMs on Telegram. So I was having zero sleep, and the only thing I was doing is just explaining to people how to enter. And I think especially with the breed, SolarApe did an awesome job, because at least the user experience over there, it's quite simple in the bridging part. Because even with the AnySwap, when we were, guiding them in every step, they were still had trouble bridging coins over to Moonriver.
You're basically talking about me, because I fell victim to your user interface. Every time I just visit the page and I see what's up. I see what everything does. Everything is explained, and it's plain and simple. When I look into other DeFi projects that might be very, very interesting in the future, I just feel like I don't understand it. And I think this is a big problem, but DeFi isn't that old yet. And I think it's going to be solved, right?
They are building now we have more than 10 sided chains, right? L2 chains like Vax and Phantom, and a new chain every day. And now people are needing to bridge tokens over the chains, and so it's creating a complete mess about tokens. Like you have Ethereum on AVAX, and Ethereum on Phantom, and Ethereum on Ethereum.
One of the problems that we are facing actually right now is that we have some users that they want to bridge USDC, USDT from AVAX down to Moonriver. But the thing is that the USDC that they want to bridge from AVAX, it's called USDC.E there. So they have to use a different bridge. So if they bridge the USDC here in Moonriver from AVAX, it will have a different name than the USDC. So this is something like that. It's extremely confusing, especially for new users. And honestly, we are trying really hard to find a solution to that. But I don't know where to start, because with the bridges, they are different bridges, so it will be the different wrap tokens, and there will be different names on the wrap tokens depending on the bridge you use. And I think especially for the new users on DeFi, this will be extremely confusing.
Well, I'd be curious to hear from Brainjar here, because it seems like Composable and Picasso are using Polkadot Kusama to take a more general approach to tying up all these loose threads. I wonder what you think about making that comprehensible to the average DeFi user, or will there always be a pyramid of understanding?
Yeah, I think the only situation where you end up having a solution is where it becomes super seamless for the user is if you just have the same token with the same address across multiple different ecosystems, which is theoretically possible, but is super hard to do. So we are looking into leveraging the customizability of a parachain to try to serve as this middleware to facilitate something like this, but it's obviously going to take a lot of time. But that it really is the holy grail is if you have the same contract address for USDC across all these different chains, it's obviously theoretically possible, but functionally very difficult.
What are the major obstacles?
Well, first of all, you need to get people DAI to adopt the solution, right? You need all these people who the token creators to actually facilitate the minting and burning of these assets across all these different chains. So it's a lot of adoption details. That's really the situation here is each chain, if they want to quickly launch something, they don't want to have to wait for DAI to pass 10 million governance proposals to to get their like stuff figured out. Like they just want to like launch quickly and then just like DAI will show up eventually. And even then, DAI basically is like different contract address for DAI on every chain, right? So like they don't want to like put in the effort to like figure out an alternative solution, but it's also because those solutions don't exist at the moment, right? So I think like the obstacles is, I mean, there's many, so I don't want to go like super in depth about like all the technical details, but obviously like every, highest one is chain synchronization. Every chain has different rate of producing blocks, like, but it's really about thinking about ways in which we can reduce this problem to just an accounting problem as opposed to an infrastructure problem. And that's kind of like what we are trying to focus on.
I think there's also a related problem, like in the sense that when you build a product, usually like we're building a bridge, right? So my perspective on that is to build a community, you want to get the community behind like a couple of common tokens, and you could just name like the bridge Bitcoin also Bitcoin, right? Because that's kind of what it is. But then to build like this community identity, usually you want to have a specific identifier, which then also makes it a little bit confusing for people, right? Because it's just a swap between like Bitcoin and the wrapped Bitcoin thing. But then you call it InterBTC or KBTC on Kusama.
Right.
Yeah, I guess there's also a technical problem in the sense that if you would have like to say the same contract address on every chain and with the same token name, and then somebody would just go ahead and deploy like a DAI contract that's slightly modified on another chain with the same token name and just produce more, like just mint new coins, and people kind of trust that this contract is actually correct.
Exactly.
But in fact, it's kind of an attack, then it's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's like the infinite mint problem here.
Yeah.
And then obviously too, like before a chain launched, like when a chain launches, like someone could just, would just be a massive rush of people saying, hey, of basically people deploying things with a specific contract address to like reserve those things and tricking everybody into thinking they're DAI or they're USDC. So I think so that is obviously like a big issue. But if mint and burn is successfully implemented, then everybody's lives on this call becomes like significantly easier. But it is like a challenge that will take a very long time to solve.
I think we also have to factor in the human nature as well, because in order for everything to work seamlessly, a lot of projects will need to cooperate. And I'm quite sure that the leading projects, for example, AnySwap, that has, I think, 1 billion daily volume or something in bridges, I don't think they will be that happy to cooperate with a project that has like 10 million volume per day. Because, I mean, they will be losing a lot of the fees.
Absolutely. Like I think it's all like, it's all about like kind of near term and far term goals, right? Like we do things like wrap Bitcoin exists right now because people want to start using their Bitcoin immediately. They don't want to wait until Bitcoin is Bitcoin on these different locations, right? So it's all about like thinking about what can you offer the user now for a change in user experience, and then sort of but still keeping this broader vision in mind. And I think that's where, I lose a lot of respect for projects in the space that kind of just become complacent. And like, obviously, if you're making 100 million in revenue from your initial solution, like complacency is a thing that happens. But I think also like it's kind of the responsibility of these projects to see kind of, upcoming solutions and try to work with them. But yeah, fundamentally, it's kind of like vampire attacking themselves. So it's kind of like a weird, like, kind of game theoretical thing that needs to be figured out.
What do you guys think about in the Polkadot Kusama ecosystem? Do you think we can solve this standards problem even amongst ourselves? Because what do we have now? 3, maybe more token standards that don't really talk to each other yet, and that's not including the NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, there is no token transfer standard. XCM is also not live yet. Akala is trying to set the standard at the moment. Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing discussion, but I think we do have an opportunity where if consolidation can occur for a solution that everybody's pleased with, like at least we'll be able to lay the foundation to make the ecosystem a bit less messy than what we see in other places. But it's still like ongoing. Definitely the discussions are ongoing, I think.
Interesting, guys. We've been tapping into some deepness of DeFi just now. For me, I was asking myself, where do you see DeFi implemented in the real world, where the average Joe doesn't even know that he's using DeFi? What would be the first area where you see that happening?
So there was something that I think it was you, Dominik, although I don't remember. Someone mentioned something about a routing kind of layer where you just like deposit your assets and then just like goes and does a bunch of things behind the scenes. I think that if that can be figured out in the most decentralized way possible, which is like something we're like looking into, at least trying to design like a incentive alignment strategy for this, then that's how you sort of unlock kind of not even just retail usage, but also traditional finance usage, right? Like for instance, if you're given 100 potential paths across all these different ecosystems, then, and say you're a bank that needs like compliant routes or like fee minimization and compliant routes, that then you can specify these things and not really have to worry about which ecosystem you're a part of and what's actually happening in the back end. The trouble with this obviously is if you've never used, say, a Kepler wallet, how do you store those keys? We mentioned here previously, like multi-chain wallet is a big stepping stone. I don't even think anyone's really like tackling this yet, really like in the right way, where keys are kind of stored given to the user in such a way where it's not just like flashing the keys and saying, hey, make sure you write them down. Like there's like some sort of like actual, maybe it's rooted to some sort of like external hardware situation. I have no idea, but I think that's like one of the biggest blockers from something like this happening.
I think adding to that, I guess if you have some relatively easy to use wallets like Argent or something like that, if they would basically implement that in a way where you just say like, okay, invest into DeFi and it kind of, I don't know, just select some protocols for you and deposits funds there, they're maybe whitelisted. That could work. Or if like one of these traditional finance, like, I don't know, Revolut in the UK is pretty big, so they would integrate DeFi, then that could be a route, but I'm not sure if they have an interest really to do that because it would get liquidity out of their system. But maybe for something like Argent or like technically wallet providers that could like specifically provide super simple to use interfaces, also with the solution to like seed phrase issue where maybe you have some social recovery mechanism so that the average user doesn't get too scared away with setting up a Bitcoin or like a crypto wallet.
To be honest, I don't think the average user cares about having his own private keys and keeping control of his wallet, even if they should. So I think at some point, let's just call them banks. There will be some banks that will just be holding the private keys of users. And there will be an app like Revolut style, and the user will just be able to do anything from there. You will be able to log in with just your account. I mean, it's kind of like an exchange. I mean, they hold the private keys.
I mean, maybe ideally somebody would create like an app that's like as it's very simple in the sense that it's easy to use as Revolut, but it's basically just a user interface to the entirety of DeFi. I think that would be really cool. So a user doesn't really care about I guess, the average user would really care about non-custodial wallets in that sense, but maybe it can be set up in a way that it's somehow elegantly integrated without them having to give up the custody to a bank. But who knows? Probably both will exist.
Dominik, would that be your version of DeFi utopia, that everyone can use it without any knowledge or any input or anything, like just free to use?
That's a good question. I guess, yes, that's one aspect of it. Like, everybody can just use it and the entry barrier is very low. And I guess my other second really massive point of being at a utopia is that if it's actually decentralized, because there's a ton of solutions that are in DeFi right now that are not very decentralized, especially like also in the bridge field where there's a lot of centralized bridges going on. So that's not really from a user perspective in the sense of usability, but I think it's from a user perspective in a sense of insurance and using like a better system. And for that, I think my utopia vision would definitely have to include the most decentralized way to build all of these protocols, where they still make a ton of sense for the users to use them.
FireKid, Solar Ape, what about you guys? DeFi utopia? What does it look like in 40 years with this superpower we're all building?
That's a big question mark there. Actually, the way things are going, I mean, I think this is something that the average Joe that is not a user of DeFi needs to understand first. And as soon as they do, I think everyone will just drop the traditional system and they will just move onto the DeFi. And then I think the utopia would be everyone using DeFi in the backend while they have no idea they are using it. I think this is the perfect thing for everything to be integrated in our normal lives.
And like FireKid said, I think like once we have a more friendly experience and such in DeFi, like people will be using DeFi and they just don't know what's going on. I think actually like and probably some banks and some governments already are using crypto and blockchain for some solutions, and probably the users don't know. So everything will be like transparent.
Interesting. Branger, you talked about the metaverse. When I think about the metaverse, I think about Ready Player One. How would your utopia look or how would it look when you think about DeFi?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think basically like a situation where, you know, anybody with any asset can be offered a multitude of, I mean, even just like the UX right now, like for DeFi, like kind of where you show up with an asset, like you have probably like hundreds and hundreds of possibilities for what you could do. And I think it's very like taxing for users, like to just, unless you've done this like 100 times over, and like, you know, this has basically become your life. Like it's kind of hard to be a kind of passive like DeFi investor. Like you can't just, because it really is taxing. Like, you know, if you want to make a swap on Uniswap, you have to wait for all these things and you have to click a bunch of buttons and you're not even sure kind of what's happening. Like if you're a complete newbie, that's kind of the experience you go through. And so I think if it became a lot more, if the UX was solved and routes were properly offered to users in such a way that maximized whatever they're seeking, then I think, you know, we'd see sort of DeFi as less of a, you know, I feel very privileged to be like in the DeFi space. And it's a feeling that I think is, you know, something that should be generalized to like the broader world, to be honest. Not to get like all philosophical and stuff, but it's really just kind of if the power of DeFi was kind of spread across the planet, I think we'd see a lot more kind of, you know, generally people doing better than they are currently doing in their current circumstances. So I think like a lot of us forget how privileged we are to be in this space, and I think it's a privilege that you know it's our responsibility now to make sure that the rest of the world understands, you know, what we're doing, and like, you know, for us to bring these people into DeFi as well.
Wow. Well, we are at the hour, and I feel like a changed ape. Brainjar, we're really hoping to see Picasso have a strong showing in the next round of auctions. Is there anything you want to let the people know before we go?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. Like, we're offering something I think super unique with Picasso. I think we're definitely a bit of a newer project in the Kusama and Polkadot scene, and I don't think a lot of people have really heard of us. So feel free to check out the things that we've been putting out on Medium and Twitter and whatnot. But yeah, definitely, you know, happy to answer. Feel free to just DM me on anywhere, and always down for a chat to talk about what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think this is not financial advice, but I think we're all going to be wanting to hold some Pika tokens pretty soon. Dominik, we're expecting a win of slot number 12. Congratulations. Is there anything you want to let the people know?
Yeah, so for us, it's quite exciting times ahead, obviously. So next week when the auction's up, we start producing our first blogs. Then we'll make sure everything is running smoothly, onboarding our own first vault, minting our first actual Bitcoin on the chain, and then we'll, you know, open it up to the community, doing our first council election, distributing tokens before that, and then we'll open it up for the other vaults, so anybody can become a custodian of Bitcoin and issue some nice KBTC. So for us, it's extremely busy times, but I'm quite excited about it, and very similar to what Brainjar said. Like, if you're interested in Interlay or Kintsugi, feel free to drop by on our Discord, chat us up, ask questions, test us out, so you can kind of try it yourself. What's going to come onto Kintsugi? Thanks.
Congratulations, and thanks a lot for building that for us. It's going to be great to have Bitcoin over here.
Yeah, it took some time. It's a good 2 years since we were building this. But I'm quite excited we're going live now.
FireKid, anything you want to say about what's coming up with SolarBeam?
Well, I mean, we announced yesterday the Launchpad, the Eclipse, and I think this will be something quite good. Apart from that, I mean, we are in the early talks, let's say, but we are thinking also of developing small, let's say, NFT game that people will be able to, you know, play like an AFK farm, let's say. And because we would love to integrate NFTs in our ecosystem, so I mean, holding the NFTs might be able to give you some extra, you know, privileges, let's call it, or just actually we were thinking about NFT farming, like, you know, holding an NFT which makes you eligible to get some emissions, but that's still early talks. Right now we are mainly busy with the Launchpad, and yeah, actually that's it. I mean, and we need to thank everyone because the community, I mean, has been great, and the success was way more than we initially believed we will have in such a short amount of time.
Well, if you haven't checked out solarbeam.io, there's a link down in the description. A link to everybody's project is in the description, as well as their socials, so make sure you give them a follow and check them out. And thank you very much for listening to the Space Monkeys podcast. Moonbee, I guess we'll be blasting off on another topic sometime soon?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks a ton.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Bye.